Welcome to Noctale Nights. This is your quiet moment to step away from the day and settle into rest. Before the story begins, take a moment to get comfortable. Stretch out, adjust your pillow, pull a blanket around your shoulders if you'd like. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it out, feeling your body sink a little deeper. Listen to the soft sounds around you and know there's nothing else you need to do right now. Take another breath in, hold it for a moment, and let it go. If you enjoy drifting off with these nighttime stories, I'd love for you to subscribe so we can share more nights like this together. Now, close your eyes if you want to. Let the room fade around you, and let's begin tonight's story. I used to think the rain made the park feel safer at night. The steady drum on the trees and the soft hiss of wet leaves made the dark feel softer, like the city noises were being washed away. It kept people inside, too. No teenagers drinking on the benches, no dog walkers staring when I passed by. Just me, the wet paths, and the hum of water slipping into the pond's edge. I didn't mind getting soaked. I'd pull up my hood, stuff my hands deep into my pockets, and drift down the cracked path that cut through the oldest part of the park. Some nights I'd stay on the main trail, but most nights I'd wander off it, stepping over roots slick with moss, past the fence that never really kept anyone out. There's a hill near the far side of the park. Not much of a hill, really, just a slow rise where the trees thin out enough to let in a bit of sky. That's where I first saw her. It was raining harder than usual, cold enough that the drops felt like needles where they slipped past my collar. I remember thinking I should turn back, maybe cut across the field and head for the streetlights. But when I looked up, she was standing under the biggest tree on the hill. At first, I thought she was just another night walker, maybe waiting out the rain. She didn't have an umbrella, no hood pulled up, no bag or phone in her hands. Just standing there in a dark coat, hair hanging in wet ropes around her face, rain dripping from her elbows. She didn't move when I came closer. Didn't flinch or shift her weight like she'd noticed me. She just stood there with her arms stretched out in front of her, fingers pointed toward the line of trees behind the hill. Her other arm hung limp at her side, palm open like she'd forgotten it was there. I remember stopping in the mud just far enough to see her face under the branches. She wasn't old, but she wasn't young either, just pale, eyes wide but empty, rain catching on her lashes until it ran down her cheeks like she'd been crying. But she wasn't. She was just wet, so wet it made me shiver where I stood. She didn't say anything, didn't lower her arm, just pointed like she'd been standing there long before I'd shown up, and would keep standing there long after I left. I wanted to ask if she needed help, but the words never made it past my lips. The rain seemed to swallow my voice before I could use it. After a few seconds, I stepped off the hill and cut across the field, boots slipping in the wet grass. I didn't look back until I reached the street. When I turned, she was still there under the tree, hand raised, finger pointed at the dark line of trees that swallowed the back edge of the park. The next day, I told myself it hadn't been as strange as it felt. The park drew all kinds of people, especially after dark. Drifters, kids looking to scare themselves, the odd neighbor who'd lost track of time on their way home. Maybe she'd just been caught in the storm, waiting for someone. Maybe she'd been pointing at a lost dog or a car she thought she'd heard. I almost believed that. Almost. But when the rain came again the following night, softer this time but steady enough to drum the windows of my small apartment, I felt that pull in my chest. The same one that always sent me slipping back outside when I should have stayed warm and dry. I took the long way through the park that night. My boots pressed fresh water from the mud with every step, my breath puffed out in the cold mist that drifted low across the grass. I told myself I wouldn't look at the hill. I'd keep to the path, past the pond, circle the old picnic tables, and head home before midnight. But when I reached the fork where the trail splits, one side down to the pond, the other curling up the low rise of the hill, my feet turned on their own. I climbed slowly, water trickling off the brim of my hood, dripping onto my collar. I knew she'd be there before I saw her. Same tree, same coat, same pale shape half swallowed by the dark branches overhead. She was drenched again, sleeves heavy with rain, hair stuck to her face and neck like wet threads, and her arm was out, stiff at the elbow, finger aimed not at the trees this time, but down the slope toward the half-hidden picnic tables I'd planned to pass. She didn't look at me, didn't shift or shiver or drop her hand when I stopped at the top of the hill. She just stood there, pointing, like the rain wasn't soaking her to the bone, like she hadn't moved since the night before, only changed her direction, waiting for someone to listen. I thought about stepping closer, about asking if she needed something, shelter, a phone, anything. But I didn't. I just stood there under the dripping branches, staring at her arm cutting through the downpour, following that line of her finger into the dark, waiting for an answer I knew I wouldn't get. I left before the wind picked up, boots slipping on the muddy slope as I backed away from her. She didn't follow. She didn't even turn her head. The last thing I saw was the pale tip of her finger, steady as stone, pointing through the rain. I told myself not to go back after that second night. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw her face. Not angry or sad, just blank, like the rain had washed everything else away. I thought about calling someone. The park caretaker, if there even was one anymore. The city, maybe. But what would I say? There's a woman who stands under a tree when it rains and won't stop pointing? A few nights later, another storm rolled through, colder, meaner than the last. The kind of rain that rattles gutters and smears the streetlights into long streaks of gold. I watched it from my window for a while, telling myself to stay put. I even made tea, something to hold while I listened to the downpour batter the glass. But the pull in my chest was stronger than the warmth in my mug. I slipped on my coat, pulled my hood up, and walked back into the rain. The park smelled like wet earth and rotting leaves. The paths were slick with runoff, puddles swallowing the gravel until my steps vanished under a shallow sheet of moving water. I didn't try to trick myself with other routes this time. I went straight for the hill. My breath fogged in the cold, mixing with the mist that rolled down from the trees like low smoke. When I reached the top, I almost felt relieved. She wasn't there. The tree stood alone, dripping with rain, branches clawing at the dark sky like they'd been waiting to shake themselves clean. I stepped closer to where she'd stood before, squinting through the sheets of rain to see if maybe she'd moved to another tree, another corner of the park. But the hill was empty. I felt the wind cut through my coat then, sharp enough to remind me how foolish it was to stand there soaked to the skin for no reason at all. I turned to go back the way I came. Halfway down the slope, I stopped. There she was, not under the tree this time, but at the edge of the field where the cracked path disappears into the thickest line of trees. She stood just beyond the reach of the nearest lamp, rain falling in a steady stream over her shoulders. Her arm was out again, finger raised, pointing straight into the shadows where the path bent out of sight. She didn't move when I stepped closer, didn't flinch when my boots splashed through a shallow puddle near her feet. Up close, I could see how the rain clung to her eyelashes, how her hand trembled slightly in the cold, but her arm stayed raised, finger aimed at that patch of dark where the path slipped into the trees. I didn't ask what she wanted. I didn't have to. I just stood there in the rain, my heart drumming under my soaked collar, staring at where she pointed, trying to see what she wanted me to find. I don't know how long I stood beside her. The rain kept falling, soaking through my hood, dripping off my chin, blurring the edges of everything around us. Her finger never lowered, her face never turned. She just kept pointing, arms stiff and shaking slightly from the cold, eyes locked on something deep in the trees I couldn't see. I thought about walking away. I could almost feel the warmth of my apartment waiting for me. Dry clothes, a hot shower to chase the night off my skin. But my feet stayed where they were, half sunk in the puddle that had formed at the edge of the path. The rain drummed on the leaves overhead, ran down the back of my neck. When I finally moved, I didn't look at her again. I stepped past her, boots squelching in the soft ground, following the line of her finger into the trees. The path narrowed fast, branches low enough to slap wet against my shoulders. The deeper I went, the more the sounds of the street faded behind me, swallowed by the hiss of rain through bare branches. I don't know what I expected to find. A lost dog, an abandoned campsite, nothing at all. But after a minute of pushing through the brush, I saw it, half hidden by a fallen branch, a patch of earth that looked wrong somehow. Mud darker than the rest, like something had been dug up or buried, and the ground hadn't settled right. I stood at the edge of it, breath misting in the cold, rain dripping from my sleeves onto the disturbed dirt. For a moment I thought I could hear something under the rain, a hush that didn't belong to the wind or the leaves, a faint rustle below my boots, like the earth was shifting in its sleep. I didn't touch it. I didn't get closer. I backed away until I felt the brush snag at my coat, turning blindly until I could see the line of the path behind me. When I stepped back out of the trees, the field looked empty. The hill was empty too. No sign she'd ever been there. No prints in the mud but my own, filling with water as the rain kept falling. I don't go back to that part of the park anymore. When the rain comes, I listen to it from my window, the steady tap against the glass softer than the hush of the leaves that night. But sometimes, when the wind carries the rain just right, I swear I see her in the corner of my eye, standing still at the edge of the trees, arm outstretched, pointing at something I still don't want to find.